They call him Seatin, the Man of Legends.
Hey guys, what is up? It is Seaton here, the self-proclaimed Man of Legends, and in today's video we're going to be learning all about 61 Bard. This is the lovely spec I have for 61 Bard here, which is 61 Bard, believe it or not. Then you got 5 in Riftstalker for increased attack power, the teleport, and also increased endurance, and then you have 10 in Marksman for increased attack power, and guess what? Even more increased attack power. That is pretty awesome. And then also from the root abilities you have on the double, which serves as a lovely buff to increase your movement speed, which is handy for getting out of tricky situations. So that combined with the teleport makes it, pretty damn good for moving about and getting out of shit. So yeah, that is the spec that I use with the sub souls. You can swap the souls around a bit, take a few points, like for example, you can take the points out of increased firepower and shove them in great fortitude if you feel like you need 10% more endurance, and you can also get Guardian Phase to further increase your endurance if you want to gimp your healing and damage about. I wouldn't recommend doing that though, but it is an option for you crazy fuckers out there who like to be tank-like in your bard specs. But regardless of which, that is the spec, guys. You can fiddle with the sub points. It doesn't matter too much in this spec, in all honesty. So feel free to go wild, but that's what I'm going to suggest. 5 in Riftstalker, in Unseen Fury, and 10 in Marksman. So, first things first, we're going to be talking about the buffs that the spec has. Now, you kind of have 3 categories of buffs. You have your general buffs, which I'm going to go for and explain now. So you have Planebound Resilience, Fanfare of Vigor, and Fanfare of Power. Now, Planebound Resilience gives you endurance, and the 2 fanfares buff the entire raid with increased endurance, dexterity, wisdom, intelligence, and strength. So sort of all those stats, and they generally last like an hour or an hour and a bit if you have the planar attunement points. So basically, and they will fall off every time somebody dies, so you want to refresh those and ideally keep them, make sure they're up on all your party and raid members at all times. Now, the second category of buff you have is called Anthem. Now, there are kind of only 2 anthems that you want to use. You have Anthem of Fervor, which reduces the cost of abilities, and Anthem of Competence, which increases run speed. Now, pretty much all the time you have a Chloro that is alive, they should have, I believe it's called Living Energy on, which is basically Anthem of Fervor anyway. So every time you have a Chloro, and all the time you have a Chloro, and the Chloro is alive, then you should be using Anthem of Competence. But if, for example, the Chloro dies, or you don't have a Chloro in the first place, then you will want to switch to Anthem of Fervor. So it's pretty straightforward in regards to that. And the final set of buffs that you have are called motifs. Now, you have 3 motifs, which are Bravery, Regeneration, and Tenacity. Now, sort of just before pulling the boss, you'll usually want to quickly put these up. And the cool thing about motifs is that every time you use a finisher, they will be refreshed. So you don't have to worry about continually refreshing them throughout the fight. They're going to refresh every time you use a finisher ability. So literally put them up at the start and they should stay there throughout the entire fight, and these provide your raid with a nice set of increased stats. So yeah, you want to make sure if for whatever reason they do fall off, that you put them back up straight away in any sort of raid or dungeon environment. So fairly straightforward in regards to that. So the next thing we're going to quickly talk about is debuffs. Now, as a bard, you have a total of 3 different debuffs. You have Jeopardy, which causes the enemy to take additional damage when hit by party or raid members, and this is basically the kind of one bard ability on, for example, a single target raid boss that you're always going to want to ensure that you keep up. And the other 2 coders that you have are Distress and Cowardice. Now, these are basically increased physical damage taken and increased magical damage taken. Now, usually it's better off on a single target for the Archon to provide these 2 debuffs. as the Archon ones last 5 minutes and don't consume any combo points at all. So therefore, on single target, you know, you're better off letting the Archon do those debuffs, and you should sort of try to coordinate with your Archon, and you're better off doing Jeopardy, because the Archon sort of debuff equivalent to Jeopardy only lasts for 20 seconds, so you're much better off doing that with your 60-second one. But when it comes to AoE debuffing, Distress and Cowardice actually hit all of the targets and debuff them nearby that are near the target that you debuffed in the first place. So for AoE debuffing, this makes Bard really, really awesome, because you can just like slap a physical and magical damage AoE debuff on all of them just pretty much instantly. Well, you need to get the 5 combo points up first, but it is extremely easy and quick to get combo points in Bard. And we'll go on to talk about the rotations now. So moving on to the combat rotations, Bard essentially has 2 different rotations. You have one for mainly focusing on DPS, and one for mainly focusing on healing. So I'm going to cover both the rotations now, and there's going to be quite a lot of excitement, guys, so buckle up your seatbelts. Okay, so for the DPS rotation, you've got to think of it as kind of a priority list of which buttons you want to hit. It's pretty damn straightforward. Right at the top of that priority list is an ability called Verse of Agony. The second thing that should be on your priority list is using Coda of Wrath whenever you have 5 combo points. The third thing that should be in your priority list is using Riff whenever you have 0 combo points, and then following that through with a Coda of Wrath. Apart from that, it's fairly straightforward. Do 1 Power Chord, and then a Condenser. That's the one with a ZA, not Cadence, which is the more powerful one, which deals additional damage and also reduces the cooldown of Verse of Agony for each tick. So that is really awesome. So that is pretty much it for the DPS rotation, guys. It is bloody straightforward and easy to do, and kind of in fresh level 60 gear, you should be able to pull anywhere between sort of 4k to 7k DPS with this standard DPS rotation, providing, you know, you got all the right buffs up and stuff. I'm not really showing a terribly good example of how to be a super bard today, but I'm just, you know, explaining the basics of what to do, and I'm not... you know, I haven't terribly mastered it. I'm kind of double tapping Cadence and getting a bit of ability lag here, because Virgin Media is extremely shitty around my area, so that's lovely. Anyway, onto the healing rotation and the healing abilities that you have. So Cadence instead of Condenser, so that's the one with the CE at the end. Basically, it's kind of like a reduced damage version of Condenser, which also heals your party and raid members for every tick that it does. So that's kind of like a nice sustainable heal over time, and kind of blanket heals across the raid. And then you've also got Power Chord going off, which Power Chord heals for the damage that it does. I believe it's 9% of your attack power whenever you cast it, so that is pretty awesome. And it also increases the damage of your next cadence, so you kind of just want to alternate those 2 abilities to build combo points. So it's usually reel off a cadence, use a Power Chord, and then use a finisher to heal. It's pretty damn easy. The healing finisher is Coda of Restoration. So, yeah, that's the only one you got that can heal people. You also have an ability called Verse of Vitality, which is kind of like your bursty, flourishy heal, which has a 20-second cooldown, and, yeah, it's a bursty, flourishy heal that you can hit. And it's fairly situational, you know, use it when the raid's taking damage and you feel they need that bulk of healing. And then you also have Riff, which can be used to instantly generate 5 combo points, which comes in handy if you want to, you know, get a quick Coda of Restoration off. So that's fairly straightforward, and it for the rotation, guys. Now, the next thing I want to go on to talk about is cooldowns. Now, Bard has a total of 4 really awesome cooldowns. You have Orchestra of the Plains, Verse of Joy, Virtuoso, and Verse of Occlusion. Now, Orchestra of the Plains and Verse of Joy should be used in sync with each other, and also in sync with all of the other raid cooldowns, which is essentially usually Flaring Power. Now, Flaring Power can only be used once every 5 minutes, and these buffs have a 2-minute cooldown, so initially you want to use them sort of in cooldown with flaring power, and then again after, well, when they come off cooldown, and then maybe consider the fight depending if you're going to have another flaring power or not. You may want to save them for the next flaring power, or just use them off cooldown. But that's kind of your raid leader's shout, and also, you know, depending on what fight it is and if you're going to need the DPS or not. So those cooldowns, basically Orchestra increases the damage of your raid, and Verse of Joy restores charge, power, energy and mana to each member of your party each second for 15 seconds. So this is huge DPS increase to sort of rogues, warriors and also mages. Doesn't really do much for clerics in all honesty, helps out the healers, but for the DPS does nothing. But for pretty much all the other classes and specs, it's very helpful, because warrior rogue specs are very sort of power and energy intensive, so they love this ability being used off cooldown, and they will love you for having this ability. Okay, so moving on to the other cooldowns, you have Virtuoso, which basically what Virtuoso does is causes combo points to persist when using coders. So basically for the next 15 seconds, none of your coders will consume combo points at all. So this ability is very situational. I mean, you can use it at the start of the fight to quickly get up stacks of reverberation and harmonic energy if you want to do that, or you can save it as maybe a cooldown to spam Coda of Restoration, or maybe on fights like Egg Tenders, you want to save it for when the eggs come up, so you can quickly switch to each egg and debuff them, so that makes it a lot easier for, you know, the raid to get the eggs down. But, you know, that's kind of up to your own judgment on this cooldown, so use it how you think would be best. You know, that's the best advice I can give. And finally, you have Verse of Occlusion, which provides a fairly small shield to all party or raid members. However, this can be very useful in times where maybe your raid's taking very bursty damage or very heavy sustainable damage, and you want to, you know, alleviate the stress on the healers a bit. Such cases as, like, I know, Crucius Orbital Strike, Galidra's Air Phase, maybe Xaviel's big explosion at the end of his Conduit phase. You know, there are tons of situations where this does come in useful. So that's it for cooldowns, guys. One final thing I want to touch on is an ability called Multiple Oscillations. Now, this is a toggled ability which makes your Cadence, Condenser and Power Chord deal 50% less damage, but they hit 3 targets. So basically, whenever there are any more than 3 targets, you want to have this toggled on, because this does absolute wonders for the healing from Cadence and also Power Chord. Because if you have a look in the combat log here, just down to the left, it means that basically the heals from your Cadence and also Power Chord are tripled. You get 3 times the amount of healing from them, which makes it really awesome. I mean, for Cadence on 3 targets, I'm essentially just spamming kind of 2k heals out here, and it's absolutely crazy. So any more than sort of 3 targets and you want to heal like crazy, then toggle on Multiple Oscillations and then sort of alternate between your Power Chord and Cadence, and you will do insane healing. And that is really, really awesome, guys. Just thought I'd throw that pro tip in there. Apart from that, I mean, one more thing I want to touch on is that you do have 2 fairly awesome crowd controls. You have Verse of Captivation, which mesmerizes a target, and you can essentially spam that target, which will kind of spam confuse it and keep it CC'd, which can be very useful for certain trash packs. And also you have Verse of Fascination, which mesmerizes nearby enemies for 8 seconds or until damaged. Now this can be very good, like maybe in PvP or while you're running away from stuff, because it essentially just CCs all nearby targets for 8 seconds, so that's very useful. But of course damage will break either of these 2 abilities, but you know, just something to keep in mind if you want to use them at all. So that is pretty much it for the Bard guide, guys. This spec is awesome in like dungeons, raids, and also PvP. Like, Bard is ridiculously underrated in PvP in my opinion, because a lot of classes become very weak and susceptible when you purge sort of their core essential buffs, like for example the buffs that Sentinel has, or maybe the surges that a Warlord has, or the buffs that an Inquisitor has, or the blades that a mage have. So a lot of classes are very vulnerable, and they take sort of a big hit in terms of their damage and healing output if they're purged. However, with all the buffs that a Bard provides, this basically just puts a massive barrier in the way of purging a class or a player's core and essential buffs, which is really, really awesome. So it makes not only your team members a lot harder to sort of weaken down in terms of, you know, purging their buffs and reducing their damage, but also you can output a fair bit of healing, stay alive, you can be an absolute tank with all sort of the endurance abilities from Bard. Your health is just crazy. Even I'm in full DPS gear at the moment, and it's stupid. I mean, I've seen Bards running around in PvP with like 40k damage. You can still have, you know, fairly decent damage and healing output, and you also have awesome cooldowns like Orchestra of the Plains and Verse of Joy, which can really make all the difference when you're fighting like a massive Zerg of players at the start of like a Whitefall Steeps or a Black Garden. So yeah, that's pretty awesome, guys. Anyway, I give you the spec. Do with it what you will and enjoy. Have fun, guys. That is what it is all about at the end of the day. So I hope you enjoyed the guide. If you enjoyed it, feel free to like, subscribe, leave a nice comment, and we will see you next time on the Seeded Man of Legends guides and exciting stuff. So take care, guys, and have a wonderful day.